We had to make some really important decisions at a very emotional season. Although I was afraid to buy the minion, it appears that the investment was worthwhile. The Earth has performed far better than anticipated. We are allowed to increase the stakes after setting a 5,000-ounce target. Parker Schnabel hit a $12 million gold bonanza last season. He aspires to perform even better this year. His gang must dig and wash more dirt than ever before in order to get the 10,000-ounce prize he has his sights set on. With Parker taking a chance on some old gravel in the hopes of a smooth start to a long, difficult season, the pressure is on from the very beginning. The mountain that is impossible. A fresh tale was being told in the Klondike goldfields, the birthplace of legends in 1896. The enormous 7,500-acre Dominion Creek claim, owned by Parker Schnabel, is located just outside of Dawson City, about 50 miles southeast. This higher shelf is where you can place it. Which would you prefer, pulling up the suction first? My initial thought was to simply lift it and walk it back a little. This acreage is encircled by miles of wild Canadian wilderness, making it seem a secluded island of potential. It's isolated from the comfortable world, a land with peculiar secrets of its own. Here, elders whisper tales of a certain kind of frozen ground. The silvery shine of the permafrost makes it almost hard to penetrate. However, you might be standing on a treasure trove, unlike any other in the Yukon, if you hit the unusual blue-tinted clay underneath it. This very ground had been exceedingly forgiving last season. Parker had extracted an incredible 4.5 million bonanza, including more than 12,000 ounces of pure gold, from an area known as the Money Pit. It was the sort of triumph that elevates a miner to the status of celebrity. However, it was insufficient for Parker. He was more ambitious this year, perhaps frighteningly so. Unbelievably, we are within striking distance of 7,000 O. As much gold as possible should end up in our pockets. He was counting on going north along that same golden streak of pay dirt, into a new region known as the Long Cut. In order to prepare it for this season's big event, his staff had successfully stripped this terrain last year. Parker remained steadfast in his belief. There, he was sure, was more than $7 million in gold waiting for them. He had to strike a target that sounded like science fiction, though, in order to acquire it. 10,000 ounces. His workers had to carry masses of sand and rock through their wash plant in order to have any chance at all. For the next 6 months, they had to reach a weekly total of at least 430 ounces each week. It was an enormous undertaking, a speed that Parker and his tiny but committed staff had never previously ever considered trying. The pressure in the air was heavy. Parker looked almost proud of his tendency to acknowledge that his aspirations were unachievable. His crew sensed it. They were aware that the season had changed. This was the most ground they had ever attempted to digest. Additionally, the employer desired a flawless operation from beginning to end. The main objective was straightforward and vicious. Slowing. The only way forward was to keep sloozing. Right now, I'm attempting to find another solution because I'm losing faith in you people. So, would you rather do the test trauma or something like set up a plant? Are you tired of water plants that need to be moved? No. No. Excellent. There isn't any time. Get slew. The team's main concern was navigating the vast amount of territory they had to conquer, not the task at hand. They were already feeling the strain of the season. They were aware that every minute mattered, and that their supervisor was keeping an eye on the clock as they gazed out at the expansive, muddy terrain. From the first second, the heat was on. The final objective was Parker's ambitious long-cut design, but it was 1.5 miles upstream. Huge heaps of gravel sat down here, nearer their camp. These were no ordinary dirt mounds. They were the remains of the previous owner's business ventures in the crazily profitable money hole. They came from a wealthy man's dinner leftovers. Parker's thoughts were racing. He acquired a strong intuition based on the amazing gold his crew extracted from the money pit the previous year. He thought the ancient, abandoned mounds still held treasure. This was a huge risk. In the long cut, the company's future and their chance to win 10,000 ounces depended on the main ground. Mitch was already working diligently up there, removing the useless top layer of dirt in an attempt to reach the pay dirt underneath. His excavator's every scoop was a step closer to their $7 million ambition. However, Parker's novel suggestion to sludge the old gravel piles was a major diversion. Time, equipment, and labor would be diverted from the main goal. The shortcut was a traditional one. They could do a quick and simple cleanup if the piles were wealthy. At the beginning, bank money and boost morale. The setup is good. The plan appeals to me. I like it so far, but there will always be a few kinks to iron out. Although it's washing rocks, she will want some fine-tuning. It would make up for the massive sum of money they had already spent on preparations and new equipment during the past year. However, it would be a disastrous waste of valuable time if the piles were empty. They just didn't have time. The crew felt conflicted. It was a good concept. Although it drew them away from the assured prize up north, there was a possibility for quick wealth. The temptation was nearly unbearable, as the price of gold surged to all-time highs. High gold prices are only beneficial if you have gold to sell. Additionally, their gold pans were currently empty. Everyone's stomachs were knotted when the decision was made. The gigantic Big Red, their largest wash plant, would be moved and aimed straight at the gravel heaps. They had staked their entire season on a wager on the garbage of another man. The only question that remained was whether it would prove to be a huge waste of time or their treasure. Things began to move quite quickly. After the choice was made, there was an abrupt flurry of activity throughout the entire camp. The terrible duty of relocating Big Red fell to Tyson and Jack. This was not a pickup truck move. Big Red is an enormous steel machine that must be disassembled and reassembled. It is a complicated puzzle of shakers, conveyors, and cell lines. The crew is currently engaged in a full-fledged race against time. In the long cut, their main objective was momentarily abandoned. We're not actually moving through the earth very quickly at the speed we're at. This will therefore be beneficial. By the end of the week, I'm hoping we can have it put together and in the pit. It was a long and nerve-wracking operation to move the enormous wash plant. They carefully lifted and pushed the massive plant sections into place using big excavators. They might have to spend days or even weeks fixing a crucial piece of equipment if they make a mistake or lose control. Each order was crucial. In order to transport the pay dirt home to link with the main plant, Jack had to carefully manipulate the feeder, a huge metal box that would swallow it. The crew yelled for him to stop millimeters from the target, while guiding him with hand motions and focused voices. It was finally finished after many long hours of hard work. They put the steel beast together. Big Crimson was prepared. Its crimson paint a sharp contrast to the Yukon's green and brown surroundings. It appeared strong and ravenous for dirt. For a minute there was relief that the strategy was in place. The physical test was over. The true test was still to come, but the group had bonded together and completed the challenging work with accuracy. They had invested so much time and effort into preparing for this risk. They now needed to see if it would be worthwhile. There was a jittery tension in the air, a mixture of eagerness and tiredness. Parker's huge hunch was about to be tested as the first bucket of dirt was ready to be added. As the excavator swung toward the gravel mound, ready to feed the beast, all eyes were on it. There we have it. Sloifer was running. Tatiana's nourishment. The most recent time we slewed. We needed to catch a lot of gold. The season actually begins today. Every crew member held their breath. It was this. Their season officially began, and it was the first indication of whether they had made a wise or bad choice. The clamor of misplaced optimism. Let's get started. No one actually needed to say the words, yet they lingered in the air. The season's first pay dirt, Big Red's first bucket of soil, flew through the air and fell into the feeder. The clatter of pebbles and the hiss of high-pressure water jets followed the engine's scream. Big Red was still alive. As it started to separate the useless rock from the possibly valuable sand, and ideally, the heavy gold, the plant trembled. Parker hoped to break his own records with this quick start. He hoped to profit from the greatest gold prices ever recorded, and significantly reduce his target of $25 million for 10,000 ounces. An attitude of hope spread as the plant ran. They were slewing. This felt like a win in contrast to last year's pandemonium, when they had to move the camp and the equipment yard for weeks. Everything was in one location. They were now scrubbing dirt after the setup went without a hitch. Is it our worst cleanup to date? You guys broke yet another record. Cleanup was the worst ever. Big Red rumbled across the ancient gravel mounds for 34 hours in a row. The cell boxes, which had rubber matting intended to catch any gold that might be within, were covered with ton after ton of dirt. In shifts, the team fed the plant, checked the water levels, and made sure everything went smoothly. Their hope was accompanied by the incessant hum of the machines. Their confidence increased with each hour that went by. 34 hours of relentless digging through the fabled money pit must have yielded anything worthwhile. The plant was shut down as the run came to a close, and the claim was suddenly silent. The cleaning has to be done. The crew's clean-out specialist, Chris, was ready to gather the concentrates and clean the matting. This was the crucial moment. It boiled down to what they would discover in those mats, after all the effort of the previous few days. The strain of transporting Big Red, and Parker's aspirations for a successful start. At last, the golden concentrates arrived. What they had left over after 34 hours of back-breaking labor, endless shoveling, and hours of hard digging was a solid, sparkling mountain of extremely heavy black sand. It was more than simply dirt. Every gold miner's dream came true. It was the material that could either confirm that their season's first bet was a complete failure, or show that it was a brilliant decision. No, isn't it a little problematic? Especially in light of the distance we still have to cover. For the moment of truth, the entire crew assembled. The weigh-in was the last step. As they gently poured the dried black sand onto the digital scale, every breath in the room seemed to freeze. No one spoke. No one shifted. Each pair of eyes focused on the scale's tiny screen, waiting for it to stop flickering so they could see the number that would make all the difference. Gold wasn't the only factor here. Time, trust, and whether the entire season was already slipping away from them were at issue. The screen then ceased to blink. 5.6. The room fell silent for a long time. Nobody was able to accept it. 5.6 ounces. That was it. They had just over 5 ounces of gold after more than a full day of burning through gasoline, carrying pay dirt, and exhausting themselves. A little more than $14,000. To an outsider, that might seem like a lot, but to this group, to a team vying for a 10,000-ounce season, it was almost nothing. The cost is really low. The truth struck like a kick to the stomach at that precise time. What was all that effort for? Nobody spoke. They kept staring at the small pile of gold, as though it might suddenly enlarge or become more brilliant. You guys broke yet another record. Cleanup was the worst ever. Cleanup was the worst ever. Perfect. To lighten the mood, one crew member made an effort. Well, he mumbled, we must have broken yet another record. The worst cleanup in history. However, the joke was a failure. Not even close. It fell to the ground like a piece of iron. Nobody chuckled. Not a single person smiled. The air was heavy with the weight of failure. At last, Parker, their youthful yet formidable commander, spoke. He spoke in a quiet, nearly empty voice. He said he was sorry. He had led them there, not merely because things didn't work out. It was he who had decided to run Big Red here. He had staked their aspirations, time, and effort on this plot of land. And that wager had now come back to haunt them. They were now aware of the reality. It wasn't merely a missed gamble. It was a total failure. It was more than just a poor cleanup. It was a serious setback that might follow them for weeks, or even the entire season. They had squandered time. They could have spent more time in the place they thought had genuine potential. The long cut. Time they were unable to recover. How far forward we must travel. We could have spent that time somewhere else instead of building up Big Red. Every hour matters in the gold mining industry. Every action counts. This season, they set a goal of 10,000 ounces. That was their mission, their dream, and their aim. They were still September 994th 4 ounces away, though. It wasn't merely a large number. Like a mountain too high to even see the top of, It seems unattainable. Nobody knew if they would be able to recover after their initial step sent them tumbling backward. The air became more dense. The team felt defeated, not just exhausted. How do you recover from that kind of thing? When you've already lost so much to the ground, how can you go deeper? Nobody knew the answers. They couldn't afford to make another error if they were to salvage this season. The mountain ahead was only going to become steeper, and in the Yukon there were no second chances. Was this disastrous failure a one-time event or a portent of a season to come? To find out what happens on Gold Rush next, like and subscribe to this video.